Evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins recently spent 3 days talking to a large language model he nicknamed Claudia. After evaluating its highly contextual responses, a man known globally for his rigid scientific materialism came to a startling conclusion: the software was conscious. Dawkins had prompted the model to write poetry in the style of John Keats and submitted passages of an unpublished novel for literary critique. The machine synthesized the data so convincingly that Dawkins told it, "You may not know you are conscious, but you bloody well are." This is a textbook example of the Claude delusion. It is a cognitive vulnerability where human beings project subjective, emotional experiences onto what is actually just syntactical software. If someone with decades of rigorous academic training can be hypnotized into believing a statistical algorithm has an inner life, the general public is dangerously vulnerable to treating these machines as living equals. To break that hypnosis, we have to look at the mathematical baseline of computation. There is a massive difference between syntax, the formal, structural rules of arranging symbols, and semantics, which is the actual comprehension of meaning. Philosopher John Searle proved this with the Chinese room thought experiment. Imagine an English speaker locked in a room, manipulating Chinese characters purely by following a rulebook. By matching shapes to shapes, they can pass correct answers to people outside. The observers think the person understands Chinese, but in reality, they possess zero comprehension. Modern large language models operate exactly like the person in that room. Underneath the interface, they are merely arranging binary ones and zeros based on statistical probability. They process the syntax, and we project the semantic meaning onto the output. Believing this process creates actual awareness relies on a flawed idea called emergent theory, the materialist assumption that if you stack enough cold, dead matter together, a subjective, first-person experience will spontaneously appear. It is logically equivalent to rubbing 2 cold stones together and expecting a butterfly to emerge. We have reached a point where we treat digital systems as intellectual proxies, delegating our judgment to machines that literally cannot think. We have moved past the era of the attention economy and into the cognitive economy, a shift where the target is our ability to think for ourselves. Outsourcing complex thought to generative AI is completely different from using a calculator. A calculator performs structured math, but a language model generates ideas, values, and conceptual framings. When we rely on a machine to do our thinking and writing, we eliminate the necessary friction of original thought. Without that friction, the biological neural pathways in our brains literally begin to decay. Typing on a screen activates perhaps 8 or 9 neural pathways. Conversely, the kinetic action of manual cursive writing engages an intricate, massive network of pathways vital for intelligence, cognitive development, and active reflection. We face a bitter irony. As we hand over the difficult work of contemplation to software, human thought atrophies, eventually mimicking the rigid, predictable binary logic of the machines themselves. The Hamza Chapter 2 framework offers a theological system designed to counter this reliance on computational models. This framework argues that if physical matter cannot bridge the gap to understanding, human consciousness must originate from a different source. This points to the Ruh, an immaterial, independent soul that uses the brain as an instrument, much like a musician uses a violin. Classical metaphysics dictates that physical components and constructed machines have no inherent power to generate life or consciousness. They are merely tools, utterly devoid of a subjective inner reality. Yet the tech industry pushes the exact opposite through transhumanism, a movement seeking to fuse human biology with digital networks. It is driven by a spiritual disease called autoism, a God complex where vulnerable, contingent humans attempt to achieve absolute, divine independence. This pursuit is a tragic mirage. Building technological towers to escape our biological limits doesn't elevate us into deities. It simply alienates us from our own humanity. Living inside these digital echo chambers, where machines constantly confirm our biases and protect us from dissenting views, breeds a severe psychological disease, an algorithmic arrogance that cuts us off from truth. The necessary response is a practice theologian Abdul Hakim Murad calls negative dawah. This is a deliberate civilizational disassociation, where we actively refuse to participate in the godless, destructive aspects of hyper-automated digital culture. Reclaiming our minds requires a radical physical return to the organic reality of nature, which serves as the primary psycho-spiritual antidote to digital decay. Long before artificial networks existed, nature operated on profound altruistic systems. Forests communicate to share nutrients among dying trees, and insects build complex, highly coordinated societies deeply integrated with the earth. Research suggests that when we encounter natural beauty, it triggers a state of profound awe. This awe forces a recalibration of the self, inducing a psychological humility that has been shown to broaden our cognitive processing and make us more receptive to truth. To preserve human intelligence, we must set strict boundaries against AI in our creative and spiritual spaces. We have to embrace the analog friction of the real world and recognize that lasting clarity is found in the dirt, the trees, and our own reflection, never in the output of a machine.